Today, we have a special guest joining us, Casey Franchini with Brick by Brick Wealth. She has been in real estate for 15 years, and she is going to talk to us today about building a long-term rental residential portfolio. And I'm particularly excited about this because this is how I actually got my start in investing, was in long-term residential real estate. I don't want to tell you how many years ago, but it's absolutely wonderful to have you joining us. You're an inspiration, and you've managed to really build a life that you're excited about, that allows you all the freedoms that you want. And doing it by creating passive income. So I think what you've done personally and how you coach other people dovetails really nicely with our overall philosophies about wealth.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I'm super excited.
Yeah. So I actually think the best way that we can start this off is by asking a little bit about your experience. So you are a stay-at-home mom, you have 3 kids, and you have managed to be able to create that freedom for yourself through real estate. So I'd love to hear just a little bit about your journey, how you got started, that kind of stuff.
Sure. So I got started back in the day in 2007, right before the first market crash. And I was a real estate agent, and I was young, and I looked really young as well. And so living in Orange County, California, it was really difficult for me to get $1 million listings when I looked like I was 15. So I did get some, but I know, but it was hard. And then one of my real estate agent friends was working with contractors and investors who would do flips. And so I kind of got in contact with him and networked that way and found my niche, helping flippers find deals all across Southern California. I would drive forever. And I saw then, like, whoa, real estate is freaking awesome. Like, look at all this money. And at the time I wasn't real privy to, creative financing. And I was like, how are these people like getting $1 million cash to buy these houses, fix them up and flip them? I didn't understand creative financing at the time. But it really sparked my interest. And my husband and I, when we got married, we started looking for rental properties in Southern California to buy. Even, back then there were still some in the Inland Empire, and we just did not make enough offer. We made offers, but we didn't like do enough to get the deal closed. Like something was still holding me back. I didn't know anyone who owned rentals. I knew my numbers. I knew how to rehab houses, like from working with my dad, fixing houses, and plus the contractor guys. So like I knew that part. Something was holding me back. So it wasn't until we moved to Memphis in 2013 that I said, okay, that's it. We are not chickening out this time. I mean, look at these houses. This is a gold mine. And at first I was like, there's $10,000 houses that are going to be rich. And then it was like, oh no, you don't want those houses. Once you drive through the area, the blight, the poorness, it's just, oh my God, just heart wrenching. You're like, okay, I changed my mind. I don't want those ones. Get me some better properties. So we started making offers and buying some rental properties with the help of a rental property. I call him, he was my coach, my mentor, but he was someone who helped me just move forward and get through all the roadblocks. And we are pretty safe investors. I mean, I have 3 kids. I'm very safe. I've always maintained an excellent credit score, always saved, never had credit card debt, like always really good on that. And so I was always afraid to lose my money. Right. I save it so well, I don't want to lose it. And so it was really difficult to make those big decisions because putting, $30,000 to $50,000 down on a property, you're like, well, I hope somebody rents it out. I hope it's going to rent for what I think it's going to rent for. Right. I hope I'm not buying a money pit. All these questions that we have.
That pucker factor, right? That like, is this going to go well, right?
Yeah. So, pushing through it, we finally started making headway and getting some properties.
So tell me a little bit about your first property. What, when you actually made that offer, got the house, can you talk a little bit about what that math looked like, and maybe even kind of the emotional state of doing this? And then were you and your husband in alignment? Were you on the same page? Did you have different reactions? I kind of want the whole story here because, a lot of our clients are very interested in creating passive income streams, but we've had the comment a couple of times where they'll come in and they'll be like, all this sounds great, but I feel like I'm at point A and you're at point Z. I need someone to tell me what it's like at B, C, and D.
Yeah. Right. It all starts from the beginning. Just, I don't know the analogy, but when you're like looking, you got to run a marathon. I don't run, but you look at running a marathon. It's like, oh, forget that. I'm not going to run a marathon. That sounds way too hard. I don't know how to train. I don't know how to get to the end. Forget it. Don't even try. You can think of it that way. You can think of it, well, 1 mile at a time. I can run 1 mile. So let me run the first mile, now the second, now the third. So you just can't look too far in advance. You can't get so caught up in all of the what ifs. You just have to make progress. So the first property that we got, I saved it. Actually, I saved our down payment money for my side hustle. I started a little Etsy shop, and when we moved to Memphis, we did not have tons of money anymore. Like we bought a fixer upper and we put a big down payment into this place. You know, I wasn't going to work anymore. I was going to be stay-at-home mom. That was my gift for moving me out of California. And I had to have a pool. That was my other thing. When I moved here, I better have a pool. I'm not leaving California. So we bought we started making offers on the property, on multiple properties. And we realized we were getting too nitpicky. We were nickel and diming the sellers. We were not getting the offers accepted because we were just being too risk averse. And I said, look, I know my market now. I've done the research. I know this neighborhood is excellent. It's a B-class neighborhood. It's up and coming. We're going to have A-quality tenants. You know, we're going to have college graduates, people starting families, like they do Halloween and Christmas, you know, like the neighborhood's amazing. So my husband and I both in alignment because we just work really well together in that front. I don't think we can have a real business together, but this one we can do. And it's mostly me that does it. And then I send him out to fix the toilets, you know.
Right. Change a light bulb, whatever.
Yeah. So we bought the house for $92,500, something like that. And it didn't need too much work. We probably put about maybe $3,000 into it. We painted everything. We scraped the ceilings, which I would not recommend ever scraping ceilings on a rental property unless you're, so that was a bit too much. It might not even been 3,000. We did hardly anything to that property. We made some barn doors on, you know, for one of the rooms that they had previously opened the wall to. And at the time it rented for $1,075 a month. Now this was 2016, this house, 2016. So not that long ago. $1,075. We just released it today to a new couple, and granite we did put in granite and painted the kitchen cabinets and, you know, put new handles on and touched up the kitchen without spending too much money. We didn't replace cabinets and stuff like that. So we did upgrade a little bit there, but now that place is running for $1,525.
Oh wow.
Initially we had got a 20-year loan, which I wouldn't recommend doing, but we did. So we only owe, I don't know, less than $50,000 on the house now. And we make $900 a month after fixed expenses from that one property.
Right.
That's great. You know, I think the thing that is really key here. So I love that you just gave the math on some of this, because a lot of times, especially in areas where the price of real estate is substantially higher than what you just discussed, I find that people are willing to buy property that doesn't really make sense from an investment perspective, right? I mean, if you're hoping for appreciation, that's one thing, but if you're looking for income, that's a totally different thing. And I remember in my early 20s when I was getting ready to buy my first house, reading some books and then having conversations with my dad as well. And he said, and basically the sort of magical rule for real estate was that whatever you're paying for it, you can get 1% of the sales price each month in rent. And, you know, I think there's certain markets where our audience are looking at that going, there's no way I could get that. The prices are too high. Right. And so I love that yours is actually even better math than that when you look at it.
But that took time though. It wasn't, I mean, actually it did meet the 1% rule up front, but I'll say I work with students all across the country who invest all across the country. And with the recent Fed hike, with the interest rates going up and the crazy housing market that has not really come down, it is harder to find 1% real properties. But that doesn't mean they're not out there, one, but two, that also means that you should not buy anything because it's not a 1% rule. A lot of the 1% rule properties that are still left are in D-class neighborhoods. They're in areas that are in the hood. You don't want those. They're going to cost you more money than you could ever imagine, and headache and turmoil, and you just would quit. So the 1% rule is great. But what I like to teach is at least $300 a month positive cash flow after fixed expenses on a property that is going to cash flow. And across the country, from my experience working again with people that invest across the country in multiple markets, you're going to be looking at something under $250,000. Anything over that, you're not going to cash flow. I have not really found it. So it's a pretty small investment still, buying something that's 175, 150,000, 210. in those price ranges, you can find something that's going to cash flow after fixed expenses and be in a B class neighborhood that will appreciate and eventually will give you the wealth. You have to have both. You can't, unless you're looking for only one or the other for certain reasons. It would be great to have both things, cash flow and appreciation.
Sure.
Cash flow is great because it helps substantiate your income. It helps, better your quality of life. And with today's expenses, most regular people cannot live and afford to survive off of a regular job. Like, you have to find other means of income that don't dictate and don't take over your time. You need income that does not require your time to be invested. And the properties that we have, I manage them. I have a troubled tenant that it's my fault. I did not screen her the right way, and I'm still paying for it 5 years later. But besides her, I don't talk to my tenants. They, once a year, I always say, 0 hours a month. That's how much I talk to my tenants on average. 0. I don't talk to them. So
let's talk about that, because you just talked about screening, right? And I think this is where, when people are going into this, one of the fears is that they get into it and then they're going to have a lot of problems. So when you talk about screening, what are some things that you do on the front end to try and keep tenants that will be trouble out and really be focused on tenants that are going to be great tenants for you?
So there's some things that are kind of behind the scenes, or, for example, when, one of the main criteria across the board is 2-year work history. You have to have a job for 2 years. Okay. Well, you don't want to go from horse trainer to target employee. You really want to see the same job, because that tells more about someone than just they have a job. It tells them that they have, that they can show up on time, that they have follow through, that they can, make good on their promises. These are things that aren't directly said, but are provided to you when you get the information back. If you get a person that applies, that jumps from job to job to job, what does that say? That's, to me, like flaky. Nope. I can't count on you. If you can't keep a job, I can't count on you to pay rent. So that's one thing. I like a long job history. I also need a credit score and at least 650, 680 really, or above. And depending upon the class of neighborhood that I'm in, if I'm buying in a B class neighborhood, my property's in a B class or, A class, a great neighborhood, they need to have a way better credit score. Their rent's going to be higher. They're going to have to qualify for more. And I need to make sure that they can pay it. People in the lower end neighborhoods, I can get a little bit lower with their credit score. Those are two things.
Are those, and are you finding a big correlation between paying rent long-term, low hassle, low threat, easy to deal with, and the credit score? Is one of the two a better predictor, or are you finding those to be kind of a package deal?
Credit scores are less of a predictor than having a great job. Having a decent job and a college education, that has really proved to me to be the more of a deciding factor. I've had people with not so great credit scores that have been amazing tenants. And it's like, and the plus of me being a landlord is that I can pick and choose. I can make the decision like, okay, well, why is your credit score 620? What happened? And they'll say, well, like I had this one guy, well, 2 years ago, I was in Nashville and I wanted to be a guitar player. And I did the whole thing where I slept on the streets and I tried to get in the industry and I was living on credit cards. And you know what? It didn't work out for me. So I moved back and, I've got this steady job now and I basically gave up my music career. I mean, those are things you don't want to hear, but you're like, okay, I understand. Like you were going to try for something, you're dedicated, didn't work out. You had credit card debt. So, okay, fine. But the people that have, bankruptcies and prior evictions and it's like, no, thanks.
Yeah. Those are bigger predictors.
Yeah.
And then go ahead.
Well, you mentioned, Casey, on that side of it, and this is a couple of minutes back, but you also mentioned going from on your mortgage time frame. You said something about going from 20 years, and I couldn't tell if you were going to go out or in, but that was a big thing that you would have changed.
So we did a 20-year loan, and our mortgage payment is higher because of it. So we would be cash flowing even more, if I would have chosen the 30-year fixed. Yeah. But, it wasn't, it was hardly any more in an interest rate. It was a slightly higher interest rate to get a 20-year loan. It was going to be paid off much faster. and we even make bi-weekly payments or bi-monthly, however you want to say it. So we make an extra full payment a year. So we're going to have our property paid off well before the 20 years, even if we don't pay it off, which we will. Right. Because we hardly owe anything on it. And that's the other thing. It's like, well, geez, we could save several $100 more a month if we just, it'd be like another whole rental property if we just, income, if we just paid that one off. So it's always in the back of our minds.
Right. Well, I think that's smart that you're planning to do that. So I want to go back to something that you said as well, because you mentioned that there are certain areas that it's harder to make that 1% rule work, or I think we kind of hinted around at it. Like I know in Dallas, unless you're going out to the suburbs, it's really hard to find properties that are affordable. And some of the numbers that you're throwing out, even at, 175 or under 250, in some markets, that is impossible to get into a B class or greater neighborhood. So talk to us a little bit about what happens if you're in an area that you can't find properties like that. How would you counsel somebody in that situation?
So, and that is most of the people that I work with. They live in high cost areas and they're like, what? My house costs $500,000 and I'm in a condo. How the heck are you finding these properties in these great neighborhoods with good schools at cash flow? And it just takes research. It takes work. It takes knowing how to find the right property, how to understand what markets are going to appreciate or going to give you the return today and tomorrow, understanding the factors as far as population growth, economic growth, local government and how that's being handled, because that's a huge factor in certain neighborhoods. If the local government has the money to fix things and revamp areas or not, or if it's getting worse, crime, schools, all these things are a factor and play into the type of neighborhood you're going to get. And it does take a lot of research. And honestly, that's the number one thing that I teach in my coaching program is how to find these successful markets that will appreciate R and B class neighborhoods, and C class, both are good, but also will cash flow. Being in a landlord friendly state is huge. That is so important. I can't even tell you. And so for those people that are living in Washington and, Seattle, or living in Los Angeles, and they're like, oh, I want to buy a property near me, or San Diego. It's like, really, do you understand the landlord tenant laws? I think if you did, you'd say, never mind, just go buy something somewhere else where it's a bit more fair and safe.
Well, you at least feel like you have more control over it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. You're looking for fair equality laws, fair laws, squatters should not have rights. I'm sorry.
Right. So then how do you
paying rent? You can't live here.
Yeah, that's right. So so it sounds like the real estate, the research part of it is really the big first chunk of it. And you even talked about that when you did your big move from California over to Memphis, that you'd spent a few years, it seems like, almost doing research on the area and nope, this is it. This is where we need to go. So are there key websites that you go to go find some of those key data points?
I use city-data.com. Realtor.com, honestly, is a great tool. And Crime Grade, I love that. Those are all some websites and helpers that my students use to find the right information. But a lot of it is, doing your own digging, understanding property taxes as well, and how often property taxes are reassessed. Like you guys are in Texas, they're reassessed every year. So every year your mortgage payment is basically going up because you're, as long as it, the market's going up. Right. But in other areas, they don't get reassessed as frequently. So you can count on more income, more stable, because your property taxes are not getting reassessed all the time. So there's just a lot of different factors. And some people are willing to take more risk than other people. Some people are okay with a higher cash flow and not as great a neighborhood because they only plan on keeping it for 5 to 7 years. Maybe doing a commercial loan or something like that. Whereas other people are like, you know what, I want to buy it. I want to buy a B class neighborhood. I'll take, 250 to 300 cash flow, and I want to set it and forget it because I need that wealth. I need that, the equity for when I'm older. I need to be able to count on that.
And the income for right now. I mean, that's, right. I think there's a lot of times that we spend talking to our clients and to our listeners as well. There's a lot of people who are living lives that may be comfortable, but they aren't purposeful or intentional, right? They end up living this life of default because their job pays X. And so they're sort of stuck at a certain lifestyle. Whereas if you're willing to take what you're saving and invest into something that produces income, then you have a lot more freedom. right? You've got income that comes in, and if the equity is taking care of itself, then in the meantime, your lifestyle can increase because you have additional income. Or if you're happy with your lifestyle, you can reinvest the income, but it's through that income that you have the freedom to make different choices about your life. So I love everything that you're saying.
And that's how I've been able to be a stay-at-home mom and not have to go get a real job because of the income from my rental properties. If it wasn't for that, my kids would be in daycare. I'd be an absent mom and I'd be working full-time. Nothing wrong with working full-time. Nothing wrong with putting your kids in daycare, but that wasn't what I wanted to do. And I wanted a way to make an income equivalent to what I could make in the real world without having to work for it, without having to invest my time to get the income back.
Right.
And that is the positive, the best thing about long-term rentals is once you do the work up front, you get the property fixed up, you put a tenant in there, but you don't, put in the right tenant, you're not going to hear from them all year. Maybe 2-3 years, just about re-upping the
toilet
lease.
broke. Hey, I need this happen. Something else happened.
It's a quick phone call. And for the amount of money that you get in return for answering, oh, your air conditioner is broken. Let me send Jerry out. Jerry, go to this house and fix your air conditioner. Thanks. Bye. I mean, that's worth it.
Well, and you made a comment that it reminded me a quote that we heard a couple of weeks ago, that the most important real estate you will ever own is the real estate on your calendar. Like you can never get that back. And so I'm thinking through that comment about, how do I spend more time with my kids? How do I spend more time at home, being the kind of person, mom, whatever it is, right, that you're wanting to go be, and all of that spells time. Like you just got to give up time for money. And if you think through this idea of inflation, right, the property you talked about at the very beginning, it was a 50% increase in the cash flow that you have coming in. And, inflation's kind of crazy, but it ain't 50%, right? It's whatever it is right now, 8 or 9%. And so you're at least keeping up with and sort of driving that forward, and you're not having to do a lot for that. Well,
and speaking of inflation, I used to be really proud of all the money I had in my bank account. I've got all this money in my bank account. I'm like, that's not such a good thing anymore because I just lost 8.5% of the value of that money in my bank account last year. So now it's like, if you've got $30,000 to $50,000 cash somewhere, well, it's time to save it, not in a bank, but in real estate, in rental property, because rental properties and real estate, they rise with inflation. You're not losing your money. You haven't lost it when you buy a house. It's not in your bank anymore. You haven't lost it. It's still your money. It's just in a house instead. It's just in equity form.
Right.
So I have one quick question, and then I think we're kind of coming up on time. So in my experience, whenever you're getting into something new, not everything goes smoothly. So what do you see? What mistakes do you see people making when they first get started that are really easy to avoid?
The biggest mistake, and I've worked with over 40 students one-on-one in the past couple of years. And I've talked to a lot of people too that haven't joined my program all the time on Instagram. People are just starting out, trying to help them get started. There's 2 things, but the number one thing is they get stuck in analysis paralysis. They've read all the Bigger Pockets books. They have watched the YouTubes. They listen to every podcast known to man, but they still haven't bought a property because of XYZ reasons. They, feel like they don't have enough saved. Oh, it's not the right time. Oh, the interest rates are too high. Oh, the prices are too high. Oh, there's too much competition. It's like, stop it. I just want to slap people. What does everyone say? It's time in the market, not timing the market. You just have to get started. So, the only way to push through your analysis paralysis or to get through it is to push through it. You just have to make a decision.
For action. Yep. There is never a substitute for action. And you are going to learn so much more through doing than you ever would in a classroom environment, right? And I think the classroom environment is important so you have a basis, but at some point you just have to push through the fear and actually make choices to drive yourself forward, and just know that you've done the research on the back end to cushion the fall, because any market is going to have volatility.
Right.
But in any market, you can find a good deal if you are patient and you are willing to look. And I think that's the key. You don't want to just throw yourself into it and buy the first property that comes onto the market. But if you understand what average rents are, what average price per square foot is, and you do the analysis on it, if it fits the framework, pull the trigger. And sometimes even if it doesn't quite fit the framework, if you can get close, pull the trigger. Because once you do one, it becomes that much easier. And I remember that even from, I actually started in mortgage before I became an advisor. And I would remember that the first time home buyers, and I will include myself in this, I think I looked at 90 houses before I pulled the trigger on my first purchase. And it was because I was scared. And my real estate agent, God bless her, she took me to all of those houses, right? And she helped me do the analysis, and we pulled all the comps, and we looked at rental and all of that kind of stuff. But there's no reason it should have taken me that long to pull that trigger other than my own fear getting in the way. At some point, you have to trust yourself and your resources in order to make those decisions and pull forward. So speaking of resources, Casey, where can they find you?
Sure. I am on Instagram every day. And so you can definitely find me there. It's at Brick by Brick Wealth. Also my website, brickbybrickwealth.com. And I'm happy to talk to anyone through email if anyone has any personal questions on how to get started. And that's Casey at brickbybrickwealth.com.
Awesome. Well, if you're looking for me, you can find me at The Wealth Woman, anywhere you social media. Eric, what about you?
I'm going to see if I can do this all in one take. At Economics with Eric, because I tend to butcher that for whatever reason, on Instagram and Facebook as well.
Thank you so much for joining us today,
Thanks,
Casey. This was great and informative. We've really enjoyed you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Casey.